longtime sports columnist and editor of the Tuscaloosa News. How are you, Cecil?
Hey, Gary. How are you this morning?
Very well. Well, we got the news that many expected following LSU's loss to Auburn on Saturday evening at Jordan-Hare, but I still was caught off guard in the sense that only 4 games in. It still seems highly unfair to me that you'd bring a guy back and he loses a one-possession game in Green Bay against Wisconsin and a one-possession game at Auburn. They're 2-2. They're 1-1 in the SEC, and LSU pulls the plug. Were you surprised at all?
Yes and no. I think if you're a traditionalist, if you've been around college football a long time, it still surprises you when teams who used to wouldn't do that, who used to would wait till the end of the year, fire a long-time coach, guy who's been there, guy who you think has probably earned at least the respect to get to finish out his season. But I think what happened, I think that there's clearly a strong contingent of LSU fans who boosters, powerful people, not just fans, who wanted to change for whatever reason, who wanted to win championships. That's really what it boils down to. It wasn't an issue of just wins and losses, but wanted to be competing for national championships, Southeastern Conference championships. Didn't feel like the end of the season results were matching the recruiting class results. And last year they tried to take a shot at firing Les Miles, and he was able to win really just win a game and rally the people around him, and so they couldn't do it. So I think that they really did not want to take a chance this year of Les coming out of that Auburn game of, the new quarterback maybe helping them, maybe various things happening, and him rallying people again. If Les were to not have been fired this week and to come back and to win a couple of games and then to beat Alabama in Baton Rouge, no way these people could fire him.
Right.
Once again, they'd be in the same situation. So I don't think that they ever wanted there to be an opportunity. I think probably from the Wisconsin game, I don't think they ever wanted to see Les make it to the Alabama game. And so I think the Auburn game, as crazy as it was their first opportunity. Could they have done it? Would they have done it had LSU gotten that snap off a couple of seconds earlier, or 1 second anyway, beating the clock? Maybe not, but one of the reasons they didn't beat the clock, one of the reasons that last play didn't count was the same old clock management problem that they've had for years in the previous minute. On second down in that drive where they waste 20 seconds shifting people and running around, getting a play in, not having a second play call. So who's that on? It's not just that 1 second, but I think ultimately the people who made that decision at LSU, probably including the athletic director and the chancellor, did not want Les Miles to have a chance to coach against Alabama.
Ed Orgeron, the interim head coach, no surprise there. He's a Louisiana guy. He's got head coaching experience. He's made it clear that they're going to overhaul the offense. How's that going to work out? I don't know. He didn't want Cam Cameron to stay on as the offensive coordinator. It's going to cost LSU a lot of money to fire Miles, and then if they go outside the program, going to cost them a lot of money to bring in the kind of head coach that they want. Any chance if Orgeron goes on a roll, Cecil, in your opinion, could he wind up being the permanent head coach if he has a strong finish to the season?
I think they'd have to make the play. I think they have to win every game. I think they'd have to make the playoff. I think he's going to be in that same boat where when he loses one game, the same people are going to say, well, we don't want that. And they're talented enough to go 10-2. I mean, they could do that and make it. If they do, they'll make it to Atlanta. They don't have a tiebreak over Auburn, but I don't think Auburn's going to run the table from here. So if he got there, won the SEC championship, made the playoff, anything's possible. But I think anything short of that, and they want to bring in another head coach besides Ed.
You're a very analytical person. You look at both sides of a story. You're very thoughtful before you put pen to paper and write a column. I want to get your take on Miles had the Saban factor not been in effect. And let's just take 2011 in particular. LSU had the misfortune, really bad luck, of beating Alabama in Tuscaloosa and then having to play them again. Now, to Miles' credit, he never made an excuse. He never moaned and groaned about it, even after they got beat 21-0. But what if they play someone else, which could have easily happened, minus an incredible upset by Iowa State, and they win that national championship? This is a whole different story, don't you think?
Sure it is, because then he's got two, then he's not. He comes out of that year having beaten Alabama, having won the SEC, obviously, which they did anyway. He's on a roll, and I think that changes the perspective of their fan base, because one of the things, I think unfairly, but one of the things Les had to listen to when he won it in 2007 was, Nick built the foundation,
right.
Nick recruited these guys. I'm not a believer in that. I think a coach is a coach, and if you're the coach that year, just like Urban Meyer at Ohio State or Nick Saban at Alabama, second or third year, doesn't mean that he's winning with Mike Schuler players in 2008. He had some, certainly. Some of them were really good players, but you create your own program. And so I didn't think that was fair to Les, but it would have changed that perception. Not only, as I wrote Monday, not only did they not win that rematch against a great Alabama team, and had Oklahoma State gone to Ames, Iowa, won that game, made the playoffs, LSU would have crushed Oklahoma State.
No doubt.
I know that's, everybody's got an opinion. A guy in Stillwater could say, oh, no, they wouldn't have. My opinion is LSU would have smashed them, they'd have dominated them. So not only did they not win that rematch, not win a national championship that year, but I think particularly when we went down there as journalists the next year to see that game, the atmosphere was that was going to be a revenge game for them, and they were going to get back. And they hadn't beaten Alabama since then. They hadn't avenged, if that's the word you want to use, they hadn't avenged that rematch loss since then. And so I think that had that not been the situation, sure, Les would have been perceived differently. I don't think it's entirely because he couldn't beat Alabama. Now, their SEC results since 2011 hadn't been good enough relative to where they've recruited. A lot of that's on the offensive side of the ball. They've had losses. Arkansas walloped them last year. They've had other losses along the way that you look at their talent level and you wonder how that happened. Mississippi State beat them, and Dak obviously is a good quarterback, but LSU probably shouldn't be losing to State. So it's not just that, but I think that would have made a major difference.
Cecil, you asked Coach Saban yesterday at his press conference for his reaction to Miles firing, and he gave what I thought was a fairly predictable answer, but an honest answer. He is what we would call now an old-school coach. He'll be 65 on Halloween. Mm-hmm. And he respected Les Miles. Miles has the highest winning percentage in the history of LSU football, even higher than Saban. And he referenced Mark Richt, too. I think these older coaches really are bothered by what it's come to in college football, that a guy who'd won 2 SEC titles and a national title, had the highest winning percentage in school history, can be dumped after 4 games into a season. Just your reaction to what Saban had to say in regards to Miles yesterday.
Yeah, I think he answered very carefully because it was LSU where he used to coach and didn't want to get into some of the politics of that. When Mark Richt was fired last year, he really, gave a more passionate answer about that. Mm-hmm. He really went at length about how can you fire a guy with that record, with that much achievement. I think part of it, and Nick's on a plateau that nobody else in college football is. Urban would be the one other example that you could cite, and maybe Urban's up there too, but there's certainly nobody with those two where they've accomplished so much. But even they start looking at what would it take? How much of a grace period would I have if there's some injuries in a bad year, and Alabama at some point, whether this season, next season, season after that, goes 9-3. What am I going to have to deal with when we go 9-3? Which coaches know it can happen. You can have bad luck injury wise, and bad luck on the field, and drop some games. And what happens when Alabama's 9-3 and somebody else wins the West 1 year? Coaches look at that. Coaches think about that. I think obviously Nick would be in a fairly invulnerable position, just as Coach Bryant was, but that's something that they have to ponder and they have to deal with, and they don't like you want to be good enough. Here's the paradox that you have. You want to be good enough to create extremely high expectations, but then you don't want those expectations to get so high that they're unreasonable, and that's a fine line. That's a fine line. Nobody wants to go undefeated more than Nick Saban. Nick Saban understands how hard it is to go undefeated, but Nick Saban doesn't want to go to work the next day and have people griping at him, whether it's Miss Terry or you or me or whatever fans out there griping in a year when they go 11-1 in the regular season, which happens, which has happened every year except for 2009.
All right, knowing that Nick Saban in Alabama is the measuring stick, it's the model program in the country. As you said, it would be a long shot for Orgeron to keep this job. Obviously, LSU, one reason they cut Miles loose now was so they could get the wheels in motion. Whether it's Tom Herman, Jimbo Fisher, whomever, they want to make a home run hire. How difficult, even with LSU's fertile recruiting ground there, knowing that you've got Alabama and Nick Saban, who shows no signs of slowing down here in the West, how difficult will it be for LSU to make the type of home run hire that their fan base and boosters are going to be looking to make?
Well, again, I think probably there are probably three guys, and I've mentioned Nick and Urban already, and then Jim Harbaugh probably would be the third, where those were absolute home run hires. Now, there's some great coaches. David Shaw at Stanford is an example. He's certainly a great, outstanding coach, but I don't think the day he was hired, people said, man, this is 100% guaranteed to be successful. It's hard to hire those guys. Circumstances have to be right. Circumstances had to be right when Alabama had that opening for Nick Saban to want to get back in college football. It was just a fortunate coincidence of timing. Now, Alabama had to be good enough to make it attractive to Nick Saban. You do have to be one of those top-tier jobs, and LSU is. So the next question is, who's the timing right for? Is it right for Jimbo? I don't know. Is it right for Tom Herman? You say, well, he wants to move up from Houston, but what happens if USC makes the move? And Tom's a California guy. USC's a heck of a job. You're not in the SEC West. So you might not can hire him, no matter how sweet an offer you make, no matter how good a job LSU is. You might not can hire the guy you want. Sometimes that happens. It's happened at Alabama. It's happened at Ohio State. It's happened a lot of places. Georgia last year when they got rid of Mark Richt, they got the guy they wanted. But, Kirby doesn't come in guaranteed. I think ultimately they're struggling right now. I think ultimately Kirby will be successful at Georgia. But they weren't out trying to hire Urban Meyer or Nick Saban or the next Urban Meyer or Nick Saban or Bob Stoops. They had an alumni guy who'd been an assistant on a national championship team. That's where they set their sights. They want to refashion their program along the lines of Alabama. So they were obviously going to be able to hire Kirby. It was just too good a job for him to turn down. But Kirby was not at the time a sitting head coach with a championship resume, and that's what LSU's talking about.
Right. Visiting with Cecil Hurt, Tuscaloosa News. You can follow him on Twitter at Cecil Hurt. I'm going to get to Alabama in a moment, but I want to ask you about the game this past Saturday night in regards to Auburn. Gus Malzahn, he had quite a celebration after that game. Had Auburn lost that game, Cecil, do you think there would be a chance we'd be having the same conversation about them? You think Malzahn would have been out had Auburn lost to LSU on Saturday night?
It's possible. Again, what you don't want to do, and I'm going to assume LSU has a plan. And maybe there's a plan. Maybe somebody at Auburn's got that plan sitting on their table. Their president's already announced that he's retiring. I don't know that Jay Jacobs is the most popular athletic director, although he may be the guy calling the shots. But had they done that, to what purpose were they doing that? Do they know they're going to bring in Tom Herman or Art Briles or any of these other names that you hear mentioned? And they all are problematic in some way. So I'm not 100% sure that Auburn would have pulled the trigger. They'd have been in the same shape, obviously, if you don't and you let Gus keep coaching, then you're running the risk of him turning things around, right, pulling off a big upset, beating Alabama. Then you can't get rid of it. Then all that goes out the window. So I don't know that. I don't know how close Auburn was. I know it was an important win for him because of the cumulative losing streak that they'd had at home, in the conference, Been a long time. And, they beat Texas A&M last year. They had, that was a nice enough win for them. But it's been a long time since they've won an emotional game like that relative to where they were in 2013. So it was big for him. I can't say that I know that Jay would have been in the locker room with a pink slip, but it would have certainly made it much more difficult for Gus going forward. They should win this week against Louisiana Monroe. They've got Mississippi State the week after that, so they could, as Gus said, they could get a little momentum going. Kevin Steele's got their defense playing well. They still got limitations on offense. Still didn't cross the goal line against LSU. Now, scoreboard's the scoreboard, and they sure did win. That was a good defense and so forth. But great kicking game. Daniel Carlson was a great kicking game. But are they back suddenly where they're a contender? They're not out of it. They need some help with A&M, but I'm just not sure their quarterback play is going to allow that.
So you mentioned Art Briles, and he's kind of the wild card in all of this. Certainly from a coaching standpoint, the guy knows what he's doing. He's proven it. If LSU or Auburn has a change, or anybody else in the SEC wants to hire this guy, my question is he hireable for an SEC institution? Do you think Sankey the commissioner might even step in? Do you see any scenario in which an SEC school can hire this guy based on what happened at Baylor?
They could. I don't think the commissioner would stop it. He certainly might make a phone call and say to a president, "Are you sure about this? Have you thought this through?" But I don't think that they'd be able to restrict somebody from hiring ultimately who they wanted. There's two sides to it, Gary, and we don't. First of all, we don't have all the information from the Pepper Hamilton report and everything that went on at Baylor. The times are what they are. Those things are extremely sensitive, and they should be sensitive. The safe campus, respect for women, sexual assault, these are critical issues on our campuses, and they should be. I'm not downplaying that at all. I just don't know, without the entirety of that report, what Art Briles' level of involvement was. Some people say he should have been responsible for it. That's what I tend to think. Other people say, well, he did everything he could, and so forth. I think Baylor's excusing a lot, in the same way that some people at Penn State excuse a lot, and other people at other places would excuse a lot if the situation were to come up with schools with winning football programs. They carry a lot of weight. They certainly do. But he's hireable if a president thinks that he's hireable and is willing, thinks that he will get more positive from his supporters, his alumni, his fans, his students, for having a winning team or the hope of a winning team, than the negative backlash, which they would certainly get. Whoever hired him, I'm not saying just Auburn, whoever hired him would get a very strong backlash from the media and have to put up with that.
Alabama, before I turn you loose, 4 games in, 4-0, starting a true freshman quarterback, a true freshman right tackle, and there's a good chance if Damian Harris can't go on Saturday, they'll start a true freshman running back. They're going to reach this stretch, 4 straight SEC games in 4 weeks before they get to the bye. Going to be huge in October. Just your perception of this Alabama team so far, and what you think about them, and what do you think about their potential?
Well, I think they have the potential to be back in the playoff and win the SEC championship. We'll know a lot more. Not so much from this week. Kentucky's playing a little better, but there's a reason the line's 33 points. There's a big talent differential. Alabama's playing at home and played pretty well, I thought, against Kent. It's hard to measure, again, in that situation. The Ole Miss win looks better than it did. The Ole Miss, they've just lost to 2. They're good. Probably in terms of talent, I can make an argument that Alabama and FSU are the 2 most talented teams in the country. Whether you can make an argument for Ohio State, for Clemson, and that's about the end of that argument. And Ole Miss played both of them, led both of them at halftime. So they're not. Ole Miss isn't the best team because they don't have the best defense, but they sure do have the best offense that I've seen in the SEC. Fun to watch and dynamic. So that's a good win for Alabama to go on the road, to be able to come back USC clearly has some problems, but they have some talent. I thought they played a little better against Utah this week and are a talented team. And so Alabama's responded to everything that's been put in front of them so far. I think they'll do that on Saturday. Then it's back-to-back road games, which is not a situation that they've been put in. They've done a good job with Jalen, I think, bringing him along at a steady but not rapid pace. They hadn't put him out there. I think George is too fast, too soon with Jacob Eason, that he's got to win games. And he did win one at Missouri, although Missouri did some things to lose that game, too. Jalen hadn't been put in the same situation as Jacob Eason has, as far as you got to carry this team, you got to make these plays, you got to do this. So I think as usual with Lane, I think they brought him along at a good pace and certainly like the things that he can do and the things that he brings to the offense. But they've been through one road game, but it's going to be a tough atmosphere at Arkansas, depending on what Tennessee does these next 2 weeks. If they win 2 games, it's going to be an insane atmosphere when Alabama goes up there. So we'll just have to see how that works out. But it's going to be a tough time.
No doubt about it. Great stuff as always, Cecil. I appreciate it.
Sure, glad to do it.